Well, good morning or good afternoon to all of you, wherever you are. Thank you so much for taking the time to join this series of leadership sessions. I'm just delighted to have partnered with Pastor Paul Bayer in making this available to you. I've, over the recent times, just had the opportunity to study and understand the work, the vision, the purpose of ABC, and it's just been a delight to observe and learn about how this ministry has grown over the years. I was looking at your vision statement with regards to how you are looking to involve all of the Philippines churches, all the churches across the Philippines in supporting the work of missions. And that's just a delight. It's wonderful to see how Philippines is becoming a great commission nation that is looking to take the gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ all across the world, and that's a delight. And finally, just to be able to read about how you see the full circle of missions, where now you have men that have been trained in the Philippines, now training other nationals, so that Philippines, out of Philippines, can go out missionaries into all corners of the world. And what a delight that is. So I'm just so thankful to be able to have this opportunity to speak to you today. I want to thank Pastor Paul Bayer. I've just really appreciated getting to know him over the recent years through the work of Spiritual Leadership Asia. I'm just delighted to just get to know him and hear and see his heart for the work of missions. I've had many opportunities during this time of COVID-19 to be able to talk with him, to talk about the growing work of missions and what's needed, and just hear about the reports that were coming through ABC. And I'm just thankful for him for his part and what he is doing even in the work of missions. But finally, before we get started today, I want to take a moment to recognize each one of you. This has been a very unusual year as you sat and prayed and thought about 2020 and your vision and your burden and all that you wanted to do for the work of the ministry in the corner of the world that the Lord has placed you. I'm sure all those plans have been changed. These last few months have completely changed how we even thought about ministry. And all of us, whether it be in business, whether it be in ministry, whether it be in a big city, or whether it's in a small remote village, wherever you may be serving, we've seen the impact of an unprecedented crisis that none of us had planned for. In fact, in the corporate world, we've said that there is no playbook. Nobody knows how to deal with tomorrow because none of us have known what tomorrow has been. And so I want to take a moment to, reflect and be mindful of you, because I don't know what technology and what capabilities you have. And while some churches would have been able to look at live stream and use all of the technologies that have been available to them, I'm also aware of some of the missionaries serving in some corners where for them all they know is, and what they have is maybe a Viber or some kind of a channel that they've been used on a small phone that they've been able to connect. I've been talking to others that have braved the COVID-19 and have, just kept going out to meet and fellowship with people. Brother Bayer was talking to me about, some things that he's been able to, and I'm sure all of you have stories about how this time frame has been, and not only what the Lord has taught you, but how He has brought you to a place that is outside your comfort zone, and anything that you planned or studied or prepared for, whether it was in a business school or in a Bible college or in a church institute. So, as we think about a time like this, and as we think about how we lead people during a time like this, I'm also mindful that you're in an environment, unlike in a corporate world where you have employees that are paid and therefore you can expect them to do some things that are required of them. And I understand that in a ministry, it's all very different because you're working with people that are volunteering in different areas of ministry to support you. Attendance is voluntary. So people supporting in your Sunday school and other places are all voluntary. And they've all got other priorities because everyone's been pushed into a crisis. And everyone is trying to deal with some struggles that they have, that they've got to deal with on a day-to-day basis, whether it be home, whether it be the absence of groceries, whether it be the absence of a job and an income source, whether it is some debt. I don't know what your personal circumstances are and the impact that you're facing as a result of this crisis, but I know it's significant. It's a place that you've never been in before. And you are also ministering and serving a group of people that are going through their own share of crisis and going through times of uncertainty. So, as I've thought about this series, I've thought about you, and I wanted over the next few weeks for us to reflect on how is it that we can lead through uncertain times? How can we lead through times of crisis when we don't know what tomorrow would hold, be it a death to a loved one, be it a death to someone in our church families or people that we work with, be it any of those other types of losses. So I don't want to undermine the magnitude of this crisis from a global perspective and from a personal perspective, because you know what this means to you. But I can tell you this: we are still in the middle of uncertain times. I'm thankful that things around COVID-19 are starting to change, and countries and people are starting to step out of their home with a little more confidence. But none of us know all of the financial implications that are around us and what awaits us. And so there is still all of the uncertainty associated with that. So I want to today speak to you about how do we think about leading through such times. I'm sure you've heard the phrase many times over that leadership is influence. And all of you and all of us, in some shape or form, have influence, whether it's you as a missionary and as a pastor, over your family, over your children, over a church congregation, people that you're leading and their families, and the list can go on. If you're a spouse today, you've got influence over your children, you've got influence over the ladies that you would come into contact with. And so the point I'm making is that all of us are in a place of influence. But I want us to keep in mind that, as the saying goes, everything rises and falls on leadership. Everything rises and falls on leadership. And I'm sure you would all accept that, because your people that you lead are looking to you and are constantly, wanting to be led by you. They come to you for counsel, they come to you for direction. And so you're in that place of influence. And as you think about your ministry, yes, we all recognize that God is in absolute control and there is nothing that we can do without Him. And then you have been placed in the corner of the world that you're serving in today, and everything in that ministry can rise and fall around you. So, in a time of crisis, if we say that everything rises and falls around us as a leader, in a time of crisis, that is exaggerated. And in a time of crisis like the one that we've just been through and are currently in the middle of, the need for that leadership is exaggerated to a far greater extent. As you read about the news, I'm sure you're reading and seeing about businesses, whether it be a small business or large corporations that are going through closing down. And sometimes a leader and how we lead would determine whether that is going to happen today or whether we can actually keep that stretched out over a period of time till things get better. But under good leadership, and I'd like to think of all of you as good leaders, sometimes that's not only the difference between a slow and a rapid fall, but under good leadership, not only do we sometimes look to stabilize and stay and hold things as they are, but there are opportunities to grow. In the corporate world, we've embraced technology for a period of time, and we've used things like video conferencing and many other tools that today are being used quite broadly. But what this crisis and these uncertain times has pushed all of us to do is to think about different ways in which we can connect with our people. And so you've seen everything from live stream, you've seen everything from Zoom and all of those other tools that have been used as part of staying connected. So the crisis has actually pushed us to think very differently, and it has pushed us to be creative. And I keep saying that a crisis gives us the opportunity to step out of our comfort zone into what I call, or what people would call, a creative zone. And all of you have demonstrated some level of creativity in that. So that's the first thing I want us to kind of keep in mind. And our goal as a leader must always be about looking to add value, not only to the processes that we have to be able to minister and serve better, but we've got to keep in mind that as a leader, our fundamental responsibility is towards our people. When you became a missionary and pastor, you gave up your right to think about you, and you assumed the responsibility about caring for other people. That's the same way in leadership. Because when you become a leader, it's no more about you, but it's about other people. And we've got to then think about, how do I add value? How do I help somebody else that's going through a difficult time? How do I help and care for and support somebody that is going through some uncertain times in their own life? So that's just the background with regards to not only what leadership is, but how it's exaggerated during a time of crisis, and how we should be thinking about supporting others as leaders during such times. The one thing that we all kind of can agree on is that this crisis came and hit us completely and caught us off guard. None of us were ready for this, because all of us, I'm sure, had gone through that planning process, and we were wanting 2020 to be not only a year of great vision, but a great year in which we were able to execute against the vision and the plans that we had for our ministries. So this crisis came and it took us off guard, it caught us off guard. And I want us to think about that, because this is a time of preparation. Because in life, you, your families, the people that you're leading will definitely go through other times of uncertainties and crises. So we want to learn from this time. So the unknown, what does the unknown do? The unknown creates anxiety. And as we think about this time, as we look at how do I look at this crisis and look at how I can actually grow out of this, we've got to be mindful that this can bring out the best in us, or it can evidence the worst in us. I think it's worthwhile taking a moment to ponder and saying, how has this last 8 weeks gone? Have I been one that's actually kind of been not only caught off guard, but I've just not known what to do? And so I've joined the thousands that have complained and and waited for things to get back to normal? Or are you someone that has embraced the uncertainty and embraced the crisis and thought about some things that you could be doing different, even as part of how you think about ministry for the future? So the question is, how can you turn adversity into an advantage? How can we turn the adversities that we come into, that confront us, into an advantage? And so I want you, if you're taking down notes, to write this down, because I've written this down as a fundamental truth. How you view things will result in how you do things. We're going to be talking about that throughout these 4 weeks. How you view things will result in how you do things. And that is a perspective statement. In fact, I'm looking forward to, over the next few weeks, to talk to you about some priorities that we need to keep in mind as leaders, some principles that we need to keep in mind as leaders. How do we navigate through uncertain times? So we're going to just have a lot of fun together. We're going to learn together. But keep that truth in mind, the fundamental truth. How we view things will determine how we do things. If we view this crisis as being one that is crippling, that has completely shut us down, then what would have resulted is that we've done nothing. But if we viewed this as an opportunity that took us out of that comfort zone into a creative zone, and we believe that there are answers, then we would have gone about looking for those answers in how we meet people, how we share the gospel, how we soul win, and all that. And I'm sure all of you have done that. As you as we talk about perspective, I like something that Albert Einstein said. He said, in the middle of difficulty lies opportunity. In the middle of difficulty lies opportunity. I like that statement, because when this crisis and these uncertain times first hit us, we were all paralyzed with fear. I don't know what you did, but I had to, because of my age and because of my heart condition, I was forced to self-isolate myself when my children came back from Bible college, and I couldn't see them for 2 weeks. But very quickly in that time, I had the opportunity to realize that God's just given me a gift of nothing else being on the agenda, but to be able to sit and commune with Him. And that began a journey in my own life. And I'm sure you've got stories like that too, from your perspective. But where we are right now is somewhat in the middle of this crisis. And it's been a it's given us an opportunity to come out of that time of paralysis, as it was in for me at the very beginning, to think about, how do we do things now? How do we actually kind of prepare ourselves to move forward into a new world, as everybody claims it's going to be, because then there's not going to be normal, it's going to be a new normal, as they all call it. And but leaving aside those cliches, we've all got to be ready for what awaits us. I can tell you some churches here are thinking about, what do we do? Do we, in addition to our services that are going to be within our church premises, do we also have live stream? Do we also have the recorded version, so that we can be reaching out to many more people outside our own village? And I don't know where you're serving, and I don't know what technology can do for you to extend your reach, but I'm sure you'll work out those answers for yourself. But it's not one or the other. It's now you're going to be thinking about, is there an opportunity for us to be able to do more? I've been thinking about, together with some others on Spiritual Leadership Asia, as to how do we actually create content that could be actually translated into different languages, whether it be tracks, discipleship material that's all available, that churches and you can take and use no matter where you are. So that's how I'm sure we're all thinking about. But as we think about uncertain times, I wanted to, in this session today, take a few minutes to think about what are some things that we learn about uncertain times. What have we learned? I'll share with you some things that have been uppermost in my mind. The first thing that I've come to recognize, and I'm sure you've come to recognize, is that a crisis is quite common. As you think about your own life, I'm sure you've been through some circumstances that have been difficult, and you know what they are, and you know how the Lord's brought you through those times. And you know then, as a Christian, as a child of God, but as a leader today, as I talk to you as a leader, that in ministry, in leadership, you're fortunate if you have 2 good days consecutively, because trouble comes to us from all quarters. It could be from within our families, it could be from a personal perspective, from finances or whatever that be, it could be from you, the people that you're serving, but it can come from every quarter. And during a time of crisis like what we've been through, the quantum of that trouble can actually multiply. I think a classic example of that as we is when we studied the life of Job, in terms of how it actually multiplied on him, one after the other after the other. For me, I grew up in Sri Lanka. I grew up in the time of severe insurgency that actually, as a teenager, I had to be really careful of, because those that were fighting the insurgencies also were teenagers, and therefore we were all at risk. I've been through, not only that time, I was part of a minority community in Sri Lanka, and I've seen that whole city in 1983, just set ablaze, and where lives were at risk. I've seen my parents' house being burnt during that time. I've been in the middle of a bomb blast where I almost lost my life, in the city of Colombo. And I've been through other trials just on the and crisis, times of crisis and uncertainties, even as a leader with American Express in the corporate world. I can tell you about Y2K. I'm sure you're all familiar with that, where we thought that the world was going to come to a standstill and all of the planes were going to fall off the skies and all the computer systems would stop. I was leading the business in Singapore during the time of SARS, and at that time we were all quite concerned about that. And then we had the bird flu, and then in 2009 we all had the financial crisis that we were hit by. And I'm sure as you spend time thinking through this, you can identify times of uncertainty and times of difficulties in your life, just like I just went through. But as a leader, we've got to make sure that we have the right perspective. And why that is important is that as a leader, we have to learn that we are required to continually define reality and inspire hope. I keep stating that over and over again. If, as a leader, all we did was define reality and we told people how bad things are and how uncertain things are, that doesn't help them. But we must live our lives as leaders so that with every one of those interactions we have, whether it's with a single person or with a church or with a group, wherever you are, that you're continually defining reality. That means you want to give them the facts about the circumstance. And then you want to make sure that you're getting them to that place of hope. And that's important all the time then for us as leaders, that we're able to do that. Because in a time of intense difficulty, there is a need for sound decision making that can result in us getting through, but helping others get through. And that's how we should be thinking about it. I said one of the things that we've learned is that uncertain times are common. The Bible talks about that, about the afflictions that we will suffer. But I couldn't help but think about 1918, the Spanish flu. I was just reading about that, and here you are. They don't even have exact numbers where they talk about 500 million people, a quarter of the world's population at that time, being infected with that. And even the death toll they put at anything between 17 to 50 million people that died in a very short period of time. And one record has put that as 25 million people. That's a significant number of people that were impacted. So the world has been through times like this. You have been through times like this. And you will continue to experience times like this. And it's important, therefore, that not only do we have the right perspective, but as a leader, you're continually looking at defining reality and inspiring hope. And both of those are vital. So that's the first we learned. We learned that, it's quite common, uh, but I'm not taking away from the magnitude or the seriousness and the impact of this particular one on loss of life and loss of economy, all of that. The second thing we've got to keep in mind is that a crisis or uncertain times like these can be very distracting. And if you think about the word distract or distraction, right, the first thought that comes to my mind is not distraction, but traction. And as you think about the word traction, what that means is that there is momentum that is being created. And you've just probably at the stage in January, you were at a place where there is momentum that is being created and was created in your ministry. That's the traction that you had. But when distraction comes, that momentum is disturbed. You have now been faced with the situation where you probably haven't been able to get together as a church for months now. You don't know the state of your flock. You don't know where your people are at in terms of their walk with the Lord. That's the distraction. And while traction pulls us forward, distraction pulls us away and it affects progress. And what it also creates is that it creates confusion. So we've got to be careful during, as a result of that, during uncertain times, that we must try and keep away those things that distract us. One of the things that distract people is the newspaper or television news, because you're not sure about everything that you're listening to or hearing. But it could be also people that are around you that are actually causing those distractions. And that's the noise that you've got to be mindful of and make sure that you're able to push that aside. And as a leader, be careful, because there is, as we're leading people, we've got to be careful between motivating people and manipulating people. And there is a very thin line between the two. Your role and mine as a leader is to make sure that we're helping people and you're motivating them to grow in their walk with the Lord. You're motivating them to get involved in different areas of ministry. But as a leader, what I've got to be careful all the time is that I'm not manipulating people because of my own agenda, but I'm motivating them because I want the best for them, because I want to make sure that they are growing as a Christian, as a child of God, as a leader by their own right, as someone that's maturing. So as we're leading during such times, we've got to be careful. We've got to be mindful that what you're going through is not only common. You've been through crisis and difficult times and uncertainties before, but you're also got to be careful that you're not getting distracted. In fact, I put a quote in your notes there, which I want to read. It was written by C.S. Lewis, a long time before COVID-19, which was interesting. And he said, we were sentenced to death before COVID-19. If that death was to come earlier due to the virus, may it find us. Actually, for him, it was the atomic bomb that he was talking about at that time. But if that death was to come earlier due to the virus, may it find us living sensibly, doing things that matter, and being others minded. What a tremendous thought for us to keep in mind as to how we are to be living on a day to day basis during such uncertain times. So that's the second thing I want us to keep in mind, that we've got to be careful that we're not getting distracted, and we've got to be careful that the people that we are leading are not being distracted. The third fact that I want us to keep in mind is that a crisis reveals what's inside of us. And I kind of call this the tea bag example. You know, a crisis does not make us, but a crisis reveals us and refines us. It reveals us and it refines us. What's on the inside, whether it be positive or negative, that's what comes out during uncertain times when we are caught off guard or out of control. Make a note of that. A crisis does not make us, but it reveals us and refines us. The second point I want you to note under that is choices make us, while crisis reveals us. And I wanted to take a few minutes today to share with you something that the Lord's been teaching me from Psalm 95. Psalm 95. Because in the from verses 8 downwards of Psalm 95 is the story of what happened to the children of Israel as it's written out in Exodus chapter 17, verses 1 to 7, and Numbers chapter 30. Think with me for a moment. Here are a group of people. They've been through uncertain times before. They came to the Red Sea and they didn't know if they were going to be able to cross. They had come to places where they didn't have water before, and they weren't quite sure how that was going to work out. But just like them, we too have come to another point in our life where we're in the middle, confronted by the unknown. And just like God had answered prayer in their life and had provided for them time after time, He's done the same for us. He gave them a promise of the fact that He was going to take them out of Egypt into the promised land. Just like He's given you and me the promise that there is nothing that can happen to us that is outside His will for our lives. And if you are in your corner of the world and you're sure you're there today because it's God that has taken you there, you've got to trust Him that He's going to not only keep you there, but He's going to bring you through along the pathway that is prepared for you. But as we reflect on that portion in Exodus chapter 17 and from Psalm 95, verses 8 downwards, verses 8 and 9 of Psalm 95 reminds us of a time of crisis and uncertainty, just as you and I are today. But verse 10 of that psalm reveals not only the fact that there was a crisis, but it revealed the character of these people. It revealed not just the murmuring and the complaining that was evident outside, but it revealed a character of unbelief, which was at the heart, and that was the seat of all of the issues. It's because of their unbelief and doubting God that He was able to bring them through the wilderness into the promised land, that He was going to provide for them, that they were not going to die in the middle of that desert and the wilderness because of an absence of water. But you and I too very easily can forget those promises that He's given us. So I don't know where you're at today in your life, in your walk, in your circumstances, but I want to assure you today that He's promised, and He's promised to bring us through this time of uncertainty. And that's what He wants us to hold on to. And He does not desire to see unbelief manifested in our life. Because when there is unbelief and the wrong actions evident in my life as a leader and your life as a leader, then it can affect somebody else. In this case, in the case of Numbers chapter 30, their unbelief and their provoking impacted not only them as a people that weren't able to experience what God had for them, but it also affected Moses. And so we've got to be careful about how we deal with our own uncertainties. And we've got to be careful that in our lives that there is no unbelief that is being evident. Because I want you to look at verse 11, not only the crisis, not only the character that it revealed, but look at verse 11, talks about the consequence. Verse 11 explains what that consequence was. God had promised them rest, and they gave up on that opportunity. Because the tragedy was that they believed that God was able to bring them out of Egypt, but they didn't believe that God was able to bring them into Canaan. Just like you and me, we can trust Him, and we've trusted Him for our redemption. But the question that I've been grappling with daily, and I want to place before you today is, are you trusting Him for your rest? Or are you thinking that He's not going to be able to bring you through this time? And so I want to encourage you today that He is able to bring us, just like He did with our redemption, bring us into our place of rest. Because the failure of trusting Him is that we will settle for being a second-class Christian, and we will settle for a second-class life. And what I mean by that is our lives would be characterized by frustration, fear, failure, that all go with the fact that we've taken our eyes off God because we don't think He is going to be able to bring us through COVID-19 and times of uncertainty. So we've got to be careful of and examine what's inside and ensure that what's inside and what comes out from inside is not only defining us, but that it can affect somebody else. So we don't have control over other people's choices. You and I have no control over what the government decides to do on when they open churches, when they allow us to move around freely. We have no control over any such thing. Nor do we have control over the circumstances of whether there is a second wave or a third wave. None of us have control over that. But what we do have control over is our response to such things. So I was reading an interesting book written by a gentleman by the name of John Hope Bryan, and he talks in his book titled Love Leadership. He says most people find strength in the things that are around about them: money, power, car, our wardrobe, the clothes we wear, the friends we have, the businesses we have. But most of the things that make you and me a leader are none of those things, but it's things from inside. It's integrity, it's trust, it's wisdom, it's experience, it's credibility, it's commitment, it's our walk with the Lord, our communion with Him, our communication of Him. Those are the things that define us. And so we want got to be careful that those things that I said define us are real in your life and in mine. That we are not faking them, because here's the danger: a crisis reveals what's inside. And if we are faking and being unreal about our communion with the Lord and our walk with Him and our trust in Him, then a crisis will show that out. And so I want to ask you the question: as you think about your life, what are the scars that you have that are evidences of how you come through those crises? Because those scars and those experiences are what's going to get you through this time. But importantly, as a leader, it's what's going to get people around you through this time. As you keep your eyes on the Lord and you follow the Lord and they follow you, you will keep them on the right pathway. There's a quote which says, "You cannot have a rainbow without a storm." And so I hope you're thankful for this time of uncertainty and this crisis in the journey that the Lord's leading you through, because through each of these, He's making and molding us so that we can be servants that He could use to a far greater extent. Fourth fact that we've learned, that we can learn from this crisis, is that uncertain times like these require us to be adaptable. We've got to be adaptable. I don't know how many of you play or follow sports, but if you were to follow a sport like basketball, for example, before you go into that game, you could be sure that the coach and the team come together to work out what they call a team plan. They look at the opposition and they know who those players are and who they're going to, they know how they think about how they're going to be playing, and they come up with their own game plan on how they are going to play. Now, that is based on an anticipated approach of what the opposition would do. But that same coach and team, when it comes to halftime, and they get together and think about the game plan for the second half, now they have to adjust their game plan, not based on what they thought, but what's happening in that game, on what the game's really kind of developed into. And that's how we've got to think about how we manage uncertainties. When you wake up tomorrow, you've got to think about how you're going to deal with what's in front of you tomorrow. And you don't know what's going to be in front of you tomorrow. None of us know that. So, us thinking through, all we would do today is think about what we think we're going to do tomorrow, given all that we do know. But we've got to be adaptable to be able to change, and nimble enough to be able to change very quickly in order to be able to be adaptable. We've got to watch out and be guarded about two things. The first word I want to call out is the word conformity. Conformity is a negative word because it talks about blending in and being like others, right? And that's not what we want when we're trying to build a team, or you're trying to build people, you're trying to build a church. You're not looking for conformity, but what you are looking for is adaptability, where people have a positive attitude, and that attitude keeps them wanting to adjust and adapt to the things as it's evident. So we've got to be mindful of that. And fifth, uncertain times is when real leaders show up. I want to just take a few minutes to park here and talk about this for a little while. Because this time, when we come out of COVID-19 and we get back into our church and to our areas of mission ministries and start dealing with it, the danger is that you will be tempted to go back to how things were back in January. But you've got to be guarded, because you've got all the uncertainties that we've spoken about. So you've got to now think about how you could lead in this new environment. So when I talk about As a leader, we've got to show up. What I mean is, we've got to show up, we've got to show up early. What I mean by that is that you and I should be visibly present. There's a great book that I was reading which talks about the Israeli army. And it talks about the generals in the Israeli army are not people who stand behind and conduct war, but they are people on the front line that deal with the battle. And they say that you will always, if any one of them gets killed, you will see them because they've been on the front line of battle. And as a leader, you and I must be more visible. So, a good way for you to think about how you're going to get back into this new environment and this when if things get, as things open out, is that your people must see you as someone that's more visible. In other words, you're not only showing up early, but you're showing up with confidence. You've got to show up with calmness. You've got to show up with care. You've got to show up with clarity, right? Because calmness is contagious. But if they see you as somebody who's out of control, then that mindset and that would spread across all of them. That's what I mean by showing up and being visible. You're seen as somebody who's confident, not because you know everything, but you know how you're going to approach everything based on what you know today. And you're being calm and you're being clear, you're communicating well, and you're being very visible up front. It's fine to be able to communicate and say, look, I don't know what tomorrow holds, but here's what we're going to be doing based on what we do know, right? And if this happens, here's how we're going to deal with it, right? And that's what I mean by being early and being visible. The second is, not only do we need to show up early, we've got to show up with clarity. What I mean by that is, uncertainty does not mean that there is no leadership, right? It's not an absence of leadership, but it shows the need for leadership during that time. So don't try to fake being a leader. Be real. You don't have to be the person who's Mr. Answer. That's I don't have to be the person that's got the answer to everything. It's okay for me to say that I don't know, but here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to see what I can find out and get as much information so that I can keep you informed. So be a person as a leader who's authentic and a leader who's real. And that's what's expected of you and me as a leader. We can be uncertain about circumstances, but as I said, we can have absolute clarity about our approach. But as part of showing up and being visible, showing up early, showing up with clarity, as I mentioned, we've got to also show up with hope. A leader must define reality, as I told you before, and we must inspire hope. And we've got no better, we don't need anything more. We've got God's word and we've got God's promises that we can actually talk about. You could talk about some things that the person has been through in their lives and how they are. You're drawing them to think about how God brought them through other times of uncertainty in their life. And you're using all of those things to be able to, you're showing them other experience of other people, your experiences, all of that to be able to encourage and build them up. And so a leader must demonstrate confidence. You must assess carefully, and I want to say this and do as part of that assessment what I call the PGE. P meaning you should think about the pain. What is the potential loss of this situation? What is it? What is the impact? What can happen as a worst case? So think about what the pain is under those circumstances. The second, you also want to think about what is the gain, right? So you may want, if we take an example of church, and some churches grappling with whether we need to have online services alongside bricks and mortar, you think about the pain and the gain of that, and then you can then make your decision. But the third is also the experience. What experience does the leader have to lead through times like this? And that's what I mean by confidence. I told you a little while ago about the scars that you have. Think about those scars that you have based on crisis and times of difficulties that you've been through, because those would not only help you, but as you talk about those and evidence those and use that to be able to talk about what God can do in the life of the other person, it would not only give you confidence to lead, but it will give them hope in that process of time. So confidence, show up as with confidence, but show up also with consistency. Show up with consistency. Uh, Somebody was asking on the chat line what G stood for. So P stood for pain, and G stood for gain, GAIN, right? And the third E stood for experience. So we've got to show up with consistency. Explain why you made certain decisions as a pastor, as a missionary to your people. It's important that they not only hear the decision, but they understand why you made that decision. So take time. This is what I mean by being more visible. I can tell you I'm leading two businesses, and one of the things we've done during this time is every morning with each of them, I have what I call a team huddle, where everybody dials in, whether it's on Zoom or on a phone, and we talk about what we're going to be doing that day. And what that's helped, it's actually helped keep the people together. It's actually helped ensure that everybody was clear about what the other person was doing. And everybody was also very clear about the things that we needed to focus on during that time and during that day. And so those are some things that I've done, and I'm sure you've done your own. You've done things, but it's about having that opportunity to communicate often and be very, very consistent in that communication, and how you're leading through that. Now, I've always said this when I teach on leadership. As a leader, you're somebody that must see more and see before. You're the one that must be seeing things, whether they be the opportunities or the dangers or the circumstances that are coming your way. You should be seeing those things before, because you're investing in making sure you understand what's happening. But the second is, you must also see before, because your people are dependent on you to not only see more, but to see before, so that you're able to not only warn them, guard them, but also, whether that be things of danger, but also take advantage of things before others do. Right. So think about what that really means for you in your area. I had the opportunity some time ago to speak with the a pilot of a commercial airline, and he was telling me about the training that they go through. And I was reading a book actually that brought this to life for me. And the story was told of this pilot who had been flying for over 25 years, and how one time he was coming into land, and as he was landing, there was turbulence just close to the ground, and that the wings of that plane started actually kind of shaking quite significantly. And as soon as he hit the ground, he knew he was out of control. And within an instance, what he did was he just took that to let that plane take off again. And he managed to get it out of that turbulent wind pocket, and he got it up again, and he circled a few times. And then when he thought it was appropriate, he came back and landed. Somebody was on that aircraft, went after they landed, and they were thankful that they were safe, went to this pilot and asked him the question, when did you make the decision to take off so quickly? And the pilot said, I made that decision 25 years ago, when I was practicing and preparing for such times. I thought that's a tremendous truth that you and I can keep in mind and take on board. Because this time that you're going through is a time of preparation. The times you've been through in the past have been times of preparation to bring you to this place. But as a leader, God's put you in the midst of people that are filled with anxiety and uncertainty, and they don't know what tomorrow holds. And this is a great time for you to invest in them and help prepare them so that they will learn on their own as to how they deal with the next uncertainty in their life, and the one after that, and the one after that. So, the distinguishing performance of a leader is evident in during times of uncertainty. So, as a leader, I want to ask you today one question actually for you to reflect on. What's the best, or what is best for your people? I hope you will think about that question as you prepare to come out of this crisis and this uncertain time. First, before the Lord, what is it that you would want me to do? That's the first question. And actually, so there are two. The second is then this: what is best for the people? And the answer to that question will always be what's right for the people. What's right for the people. God will show you what you would need to do as you commune with Him, and He will whisper in your ear as to what is right for what He wants you to do. And our focus during this time as leaders must be to forget about us and think about the people that the Lord has put you in the middle of, and how you can help them navigate today, tomorrow, the day after that, till as long as this uncertain time would last, so that they come through this time not distracted, but people that have the right traction in their walk with the Lord, in their communion with Him, and in their relationship with Him. I'm going to just pause there for today, and I'm looking forward to the sessions that we have Tuesdays over the next 3 weeks, next 4 weeks. But if anyone has a question that you'd care to type in, I'd be more than happy to just take the next 2 or 3 minutes to answer anyone. I'm not able to kind of scroll through all. Thank you for all of the comments that you put in. Does anyone have a question that you'd like to type out there? And we're more than happy to take a few minutes to talk through that. It's just wonderful to see missionaries from Singapore, Thailand, Myanmar, Japan, all across in many, many countries. And that's just been that's a real blessing. And I hope the session's been beneficial to you. And if even after this session, if you've got questions that you've got to write, Pastor Bayer has my email address. And Pastor Bayer, I'm more than happy for you to share it with them. And if you have any questions that, or something in particular that you're dealing with that you'd like to kind of seek some counsel on, I'd be more than happy to share that with you. I've been personally working with, I spent 27 years with American Express, managing businesses for them all across Asia and Australia and New Zealand. I had the privilege to manage lots of the businesses, parts of the business across lots of these countries. And I had the opportunity to learn. And one day, a missionary friend of mine told me, maybe the Lord is allowing you to see all of these and get involved in all of these, not because He wants to make the world rich, but because of your preparation. So I saw those 27 years as my time of preparation. And I'm thankful for how the Lord used that opportunity, as I had the opportunity to travel all across through Asia many, many times over, because I was traveling almost every week, to be able to not only see the financial districts, but to be able to meet with pastors and missionaries and see people in their lost condition, irrespective of which country they were living in or irrespective of what their religious background was. whether they went to a denominational church where they just went because they thought they were Christians, or whether they came from a Buddhist or a Hindu background. But it is what the Lord allowed me to see, is what the Lord then used subsequently in my life just to increase that burden for Asia and the 1040 region, and the need for the gospel across this region of 5.3 billion people. And I was just sharing with a group of Chinese ladies and some men, just in a group last Friday around that. I was telling them about two people that even recently that I had the opportunity to just see as to how they did not know Jesus Christ, but they had somebody to ask, and they gave their hearts to the Lord. But I constantly think about the billions around in this region that don't have somebody to ask. And I'm saying that to encourage you to think about how you possibly, in addition to what you're doing around ministering in the place that God has for you, look at expanding that opportunity by using some of the technology that God's made, just presented us with, that we could use even to be able to get that. But you want to be able to do that carefully. I'm mindful of the countries and the circumstances in the countries that some of you live and serve in, and just it's wise to be careful, and but also be thinking about those opportunities. So I'm going to pause there right now, and then finish this time. And as I said, I'm happy to take any questions even during the week, and I look forward to seeing you again next week, Tuesday, 11 a.m. Manila time. Thank you. Have a great day and a great week.